So some backstory before I get into what happened. I'm a 17-year-old girl and I live with my mother, 43F, my stepdad, and my 2 step-siblings. I have 1 stepbrother and a younger stepsister, but we are not close to each other. My stepbrother, let's call him Jackson, is a year older than me, and my stepsister, Emma, is 2 years younger than me. All of us go to the same high school, but we don't have any friends in common and we have just been close. My mother got married to their father after dating for almost 5 years. The wedding was 3 years ago. But our families have been living together for 6 years now and the wedding was just a formality. As for my father, he unfortunately passed away when I was really little and I never got to spend much time with him. I barely even remember him because I was very young when he passed away. My parents were never married and my dad's family didn't approve of my mother, because she was a bit of a party girl and didn't have a good reputation back then in their town. So they lived together for a short time but didn't get married because then his parents would have probably cut him off. He was diagnosed with leukemia in its later stages when he was just 27 and by the time they found out about it, it was too late to do anything. Thankfully, he had the time to get his affairs in order, and he managed to set up an education fund for me for after he was gone. So I would have nothing to worry about and my mother wouldn't have to push herself to work hard after he passed away. I have always known about it since his lawyer told me when I was really young. My dad's lawyer was the one controlling the flow of the money but after I turned 18, I would be in full control of the fund. For a long time after my dad passed away, it was just me and my mother and I got used to it. Then my stepdad came into the picture when I was around 8 years old and after dating, for a while, all of us moved in together. My mother had moved out of the town that we used to live in because she said that it was just too painful to live in the same place that she and my dad had met. I have never met my grandparents on my dad's side of the family because my dad's parents were just never interested in meeting me. We do occasionally visit my mom's parents and they're nice enough but my mother's family is not really connected. So when I moved in with my stepdad and his kids, I had really high hopes because I thought that I was finally going to have a big and happy family. I had a lot of expectations when I was younger. But sadly, my new family didn't manage to live up to it and I don't really blame them for it, but it was quite disappointing for me when I was little. It wasn't as though they didn't make me feel welcome or they treated me badly, but there was something really off about everybody's energy. All of us left together but we never really felt like a family and I never managed to connect with either my step or his kids. We would live in the same house, but they never really made an effort to make me feel comfortable or try to get to know me. I tried several times, but they didn't seem very enthusiastic about it so I gave up after trying for a couple of months. I accepted that all of us were more like glorified roommates, rather than actual family, and that was it. I didn't romanticize it. My mother, however, was a different story because she was treated differently by them. That energy towards my mom was completely different and they actually treated her like a part of the family. I might be way off here, but I feel like part of the reason that my step-siblings and my stepfather were happy to include my mother and play happy family with her and exclude me, was because my stepdad's ex-wife had been kind of a nightmare. I have never met her myself, but I have heard about her, and she was a total gold digger from what I heard who left my stepdad almost penniless after the divorce. He had to build his life back from scratch and to make matters worse, he also had to take care of my step-siblings on his own. Their mother had given up custody and abandoned them to take off with her new lover shortly after the divorce. Meeting a woman like my mother, who is the exact opposite of his ex-wife, was probably great for all of them. But I was not really required in that scenario and that's exactly how they made me feel, like an afterthought. I can't define it and I can't think of any examples off the top of my head but it was just based on vibes and energy. I always got that feeling that, in spite of being part of the family, I wasn't really part of the family. My only consolation was the fact that I could have been overthinking things and that's what I used to tell myself whenever things would get a little too much for me. It feels weird to say this but I was actually kind of jealous because it felt like my mother had finally found her people but I was still on the outside. I started resenting all of them after a few years because it was like I had been left behind or something. I never brought it up with anybody because it always just seemed petty and meaningless, so I didn't want to make a big deal out by saying anything about it. That's how life was and I wasn't okay with it, but I was content. Now, coming to what happened, a couple of days ago. I have been looking for colleges for the past few weeks because I'm supposed to graduate in a few months and I need to start sending out applications. I'm not worried about the money because like I said, my mother had always told me that there was a fund set aside for me and that's what I was going to use. But then, a few days ago, my mother said that she needed to talk to me about something really important. She told me that my stepfather hadn't been able to save money for his kids to go to college, so, she needed me to help my family out and let my step-siblings use the money for my college fund as well. Jackson had taken a gap year and was about to start college at the same time as me, so that's what the conversation was really about. Legally, my mother couldn't control the funds because, in his will, my father had clearly stated that only I would be able to control where I spent my money after I turned 18. And if I'm being honest, I didn't want to share the money with my step-siblings. For starters, I didn't consider them family and I'm sure that neither did they. And secondly, even if I didn't end up using the entire amount that my father had kept for me, I would still like to use it for myself. That kind of money could really help me get a head start and be useful to me when I get my own apartment and stuff. Until I started earning, when he was going to help me out. I had already saved a lot since I went to public school instead of private, and my mother didn't have to spend any money on my education so far. I was also a really good student, so I was hoping to get a scholarship in whichever college I decided to apply and enroll in. Money had never been a matter of concern for me, but now that I was getting older and I was about to turn 18 in a few months, I was starting to think about saving and earning. So giving away money from my funds to my step-siblings didn't sound like a great idea. So I told my mother that I wouldn't be sharing those funds with them because I didn't think that it was necessary. If Jackson really wanted to go to college, he could just do what millions of kids do anyway, and get a student loan. My mother was not pleased with my answer, and she said that I was being selfish. But I didn't even disagree. I was indeed being selfish and I didn't see anything wrong with it. So instead of arguing with her, I just told her that I was being selfish and it was completely fine because I didn't consider my step-siblings family. That's when my mother started screaming at me because apparently, she believed that what I had said was no less than a criminal offense. It took me a few seconds to even process the fact that she was losing her mind simply because I had spoken the truth and told her that I didn't think of my step-siblings as family. The double standards were crazy because on one hand, the family had been treating me like an outsider for the past 8 years and she had never seemed to notice it. Or maybe she didn't notice it and she just didn't care. But when it came to me, I had to consider them family and treat them as such for absolutely no reason. I tried to speak to her calmly and without screaming in her face, but there was no point because she was already going off on me and calling me ungrateful, and whatnot. So I waited for her to finish yelling at me, and then I told her that she could scream at me all she wanted, but I wasn't going to change my mind. The only thing that screaming at me was going to accomplish was it was only going to alienate me even more and make me feel even less inclined to help them out in any capacity. My mother calmed down a little after I said that, and I thought that we were finally going to have a rational discussion afterwards and I would finally be able to voice out my feelings. But that was foolish of me. I had forgotten that in that household, my feelings absolutely didn't matter, and all that mattered was, if my mother, my stepfather, and my step-siblings were happy. My happiness was not very important to any of them. So after my mother calmed down, she told me that I had a week to make up my mind, but after that, she would be forced to kick me out of the house. I thought that she was joking because it was simply ridiculous. But she told me that she wasn't, and since my birthday was coming up in less than a month, she would soon not even be legally obliged to let me live with them because I wouldn't be a minor anymore. So I would be out of the house and I would be completely on my own if I didn't agree to share the college fund that my father had specifically just for me with my step-siblings. I could hardly even believe that my own mother would say such a thing and put me in such a difficult position, just for the sake of my step-siblings, when I was supposed to be her own flesh and blood. She told me to tread carefully and think this over because this decision could cost me everything. And then she left the room while I sat there and tried to process what she just said. It was incredibly insulting for me to be treated that way by my own mother, and that day, I made up my mind that I was going to get out of this house. No matter what the cost. So I started talking to my friends and told them that I needed help to find an apartment of my own because I was planning to move out for my 18th birthday. I told him everything that my mother had said and explained the urgency of the situation to them. I knew that once I turned 18, I would get all the money and then I would be able to control where I spent it. Yes, I would have to stick to a budget and choose my degree and college very carefully. But it was worth it because that meant that at least now, I would be able to move out and live on my own instead of putting up with my family. Or rather, forcing them to tolerate me, because after that conversation with my mother, it was clearer than ever that I was not welcome in that house at all and I really was an afterthought. All these years, I had not been overthinking anything. In fact, I might have even been underthinking things because I really hadn't ever seen this coming. A couple of days passed, and a friend of mine told me that she had been able to speak to a cousin who was also applying to the same colleges that I was because we had an interest in the same field. She was planning to live in an apartment because she wanted to be independent from the beginning, and my friend had suggested that I get in touch with her so if we ended up going to the same college, we could rent out an apartment together and live there. I thought that it was a great idea and got in touch with my friend's cousin almost immediately. We worked out everything and I told them about my situation as well. She seemed to be very empathetic, and I could tell that she was a nice person and I would get along with her. So that part was all sorted out. The only thing I had to worry about was where I would live until college started since there were quite a few months to go before that. But it turned out to be pretty easy for me to figure that one out because my friends told me that I could take to living with them until college finally started. It was a messy and risky plan, but I was willing to go through with it because anything would be better than living with my mother and these people because the way that I was being treated after that fight with my mom was horrible. And I don't mean horrible in the sense that they were speaking to me badly or torturing me or whatever, but what they were doing was far more humiliating. They had all ganged up on me and were acting like I was the single most disgusting creature to ever exist. Like if I would enter a room, everybody would instantly stop talking and go back to their own rooms. They would give me the side eye all the time and refuse to even speak to me like I'd done something wrong. It was humiliating and I felt like running away because it just felt so bad. It took me a while to arrange something for myself, But I made up my mind that as soon as my friends were ready to take me in, I would leave this place. So the day that my mother spoke to me again, to ask me if I had changed my mind or not, I decided to tell her the truth and then leave. I told her that I had not changed my mind, as a matter of fact, and that I would actually be leaving this place. I told her that the way that she and her family had been treating me for the past week was nothing short of psychotic and I couldn't put up with it anymore. I told her that I had already spoken to a couple of friends and that I would be living with them until I could start college and move away from here. I said that I never wanted to see her again, so she was free to kick me out and it wouldn't make a difference to me. I already had a plan in mind, so I wasn't very surprised when my mother started yelling at me once more and told me that I needed to get out of her house because this was no place for selfish, ungrateful brats like me. I left pretty gladly and I was happy to see the last of them, but that wasn't the end of the road for my plan. During the time that I had been spending in my room, all by myself, I had been thinking of ways to get back at my mother. Ever since she got married to my stepfather, life had changed for me, and not in a good way. But she didn't even seem to care about it because she was happy with her new family. I had tried to be happy for her and suppress my own feelings about this, but now, it was very obvious that she didn't care about me in general and her stepkids were more important to her than me. The way she had been treating me made me feel like crap and I had made up my mind that I was not going to let this go unanswered. So that's why, as soon as I was out of the house, I decided to spill the beans on her and let everybody know what kind of a person she really was. The only reason I had even waited for a week to get out of her house and then speak about her ridiculous demands was because I didn't want her to be able to have any access to me to even tell me how disappointed she was in me or whatever. Because nobody in their right mind would ever support the things that she had said to me, and I knew that. Once I had moved in with a friend, I decided to go online and make a post about my mother. I typed out the incident that took place and how my mother had been screaming at me just because I didn't want to contribute to my step-siblings' college fund. I also mentioned none of them had ever treated me like family, but my mother never seemed to have a problem with that. It was only a problem when I did the same thing to them. I talked about the double standards. I also mentioned how she had practically forgotten about me once she started living with her new family, and I also said that I found her to be the single most selfish being on this planet because of the way that she had been behaving with me just for saying no to something completely ridiculous. Any sane person in my position would have said no, since the money that she had been talking about had been left to me specifically by my father. It was not anybody else to use, and I didn't think it was fair to demand that I share it with people who never made me feel like a part of their family. I might have even considered it if my step-siblings had been nice to me at any point, but that was not the case here. I was really frustrated, and I let out all my frustration in that one post. I knew that this negatively impacted my mother since I had a lot of people who followed me, including my mother's friends and their kids. But at the time, I just didn't care and I wanted to get back at her. Truth be told, she had been my only source of support and happiness throughout my life, because I had only one parent to count on and my grandparents weren't really in touch with me. She had been my first and most important friend, so when she chose my step-siblings over me, it felt like a huge betrayal. I was really hurt and I just wanted to get it all out of my system without caring about the consequences. So I made that post, and exactly what I had expected would happen is what happened. I received several messages from my mother, saying that I had ruined her life because everyone had seen that post and it had been shared numerous times. My mother was pretty popular among her circle of friends. There was no big surprise that people were just looking for an excuse to gossip about her, and I had played right into their hands. She had tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer any calls and neither did I respond to any texts. I was just miserable, and I had hoped that making the post would make me feel less upset, but the messages that my mother sent me after that only made me feel worse about my decision. I could tell, through her text, that she was really torn up about this. She said things like she never expected me to do something like this, that she had believed that she had raised me to be kind and compassionate, but I was the opposite of both those things and she couldn't even believe that I was her daughter anymore. And then she pulled out the big guns, and told me that had my father been alive today to witness this vindictive and malicious side of me, he would be terribly disappointed, and wouldn't even want to be related to me. That really got me and I felt like I was doing something horrible. I started rethinking everything and that's what brought me here eventually. At this point, I don't even know if it was right of me to not want to share my funds with my step-siblings. I don't know if I should make things right with my mother and the others because I don't even know if I can face them anymore after what I did. But also, this might be a very clever way of trying to manipulate me, and if it is, it's definitely working. That's why I need you guys to help me because now that everybody has the facts, I can finally come to a conclusion. So Ida for refusing to share my college fund with my step-siblings and then making a post against my mother? Update 1. Hi. So first, so much for the response. A lot of you sent me really kind messages and it made me feel better about myself and what I did. I guess I needed that to see things for what they truly are. I was about to give my mother a chance again, just because I wanted to see the good in her and I wanted to believe that she wasn't a bad person. But what kind of mother says and does the things that she did? She's just not a good person and it's time that I accepted it instead of trying to fight it. So I blocked her to make sure that she couldn't reach out to me again. I knew that if she texted me again, it would only be to manipulate me or to get that post down. I don't want to take that post down. I want it to stay up at least until she apologizes to me. She knows where I am because my friend's mother told her that I was living with them. So she knows where to reach me, and in spite of knowing, if she doesn't reach out to me, I'll take it as a sign that neither does she care about me and not as she cares about her own reputation. Update 2. So, it's been 2 weeks since I have been living with my friend and have moved out from my stepfather's house. After that post, I had absolutely zero contact with everyone from my family. I did go to school a couple of days and I ran into Emily a few times, but she just shot me a really nasty look and pretended like I wasn't even there. Not surprising, considering the fact that they are pretty much expert in pretending that I don't exist. They have been doing it for the past 8 years, they must have found it easier now. Anyway, my mother finally came to visit me last evening. She arrived here with a black plastic bag that people generally use for trash and dumped it in the living room, saying that it had all my leftover stuff in it. Basically, everything that I had been able to pack into my duffel bag when I was leaving my house. It felt a little insulting that she had used a trash bag to pack my stuff, and it was way more insulting when she dumped it all on the floor of the living room, leaving me to gather it. My friend, and her parents, who saw this all unfold, were scandalized. They did not appreciate my mother's behavior one bit and actually took it upon themselves to argue with her about it. They told her that considering the fact that I was her only daughter, she should have some compassion for me instead of treating me so cruelly. They really schooled her, but she didn't take it kindly. She told them that they had no right to speak about her parents' techniques when they were the ones harboring a delinquent like me. I almost burst out laughing when she said that because I was far from a delinquent, I was literally a scholar student and she had known that. I almost mentioned it myself, but I didn't have to, thanks to my friend who stood up for me. She told my mother off and said that she was grateful that her parents were nothing like my mother and had a heart. It turned into a bit of a catfight, after which my mother got really huffy and left. I was really thankful for my friend and her parents. I don't think it was really necessary for them to stand up for me, but they did, and I couldn't be happier about it. This is probably the first time in my life that I had somebody to fight for me on my behalf, and it was just really touching. But anyway, I don't think my mother will be coming back anytime soon because, after the welcome that she received yesterday, I wouldn't dare to show up around here again. And I really hope that she doesn't show up because I'm just sick of the drama now. I want to move on with my life and start a new chapter, but I can't do that if she keeps showing up again and again. So I pray, and I hope that this is the last time that I have come across her. Update 3. Hey, folks. So, long time, no see. I have been MIA for quite a while now, a couple of months I think. But you can't blame me for it. It was because I was applying to colleges and trying to get into a good one with a scholarship. I had been grinding really hard and it all paid off. I'm in my first choice of school now, and yes, I'm sticking to the plan that I had come up with a couple of months ago. My friend's cousin, who was applying to the same colleges, also got in here, and we are going to rent an apartment and live together. She's a really sweet girl, and the fact that she is my friend's cousin, it's just a cherry on the top because this way I get to keep in touch with everyone. The last couple of months have been very difficult for me emotionally, but my friends helped me get through it all, and I can't tell you guys how thankful I am to have such people in my life. I know a lot of people who have terrible parents and families rely on their friends for emotional support, but I have tried to avoid that so far. However, now that I know how far my friends are willing to go for me, I feel like they are my family. I'm always going to be grateful for everything that people have done for me. Seriously, I don't think I could have made it this far without everybody's help. And that includes the people here who reached out to me through messages and said such supportive things to help me get through this. It's just really strange and funny how my own mother hasn't even bothered to text me even once after I moved out. She didn't even care that I had unblocked her and she could actually talk to me. That's how little I mean to her, but you guys and my friends told me to have faith in myself because I could do it. It's really cute. How literal strangers on the internet did more for me than my mother did. But anyway, that's all in the past now. I'm looking forward to having a fresh start here, and I'm really excited for what the future holds.